Hello and welcome. You may or may not have watched the film Amar Akbar Anthony, but it might be useful to know that it has had a very profound impact and a reflection of the time that it was made in the 70s in India, and a certain time and space in Bollywood as well. Someone has taken the time and effort to document all of that and that particular period, and I'm going to be talking to Sidharth Bhatia, journalist and writer of late on Indian cinema and Bollywood, but from a different perspective, or many different perspectives. Sidharth, what's so different about Amar Akbar Anthony?
Well, firstly, I always
let me first tell you why I'm qualified to ask you about that. I have actually seen the film being shot at Mount Mary Steps in Bandra.
You're a fortunate man.
Yeah, I was a kid in school, and I remember watching at least 3 or 4 sequences, including one, I think there was a motorcycle going down the steps. There was another sequence, I think, where Bachchan was walking into Mount Mary Church, and there were several sequences which were shot around there. So, as a young kid out of school.
So, you're more closely associated then?
Yes.
No, see, at the beginning, what you started with, I'm, a journalist, so-called mainstream journalist, writing on politics and the economy and that kind of thing. But cinema, and especially cinema of a particular period, is of great interest to me. Even my first book on Navketan films was, on cinema. Amar Akbar Anthony, to me, represented, I was given a choice by the publishers to write on any film that I wanted. Amar Akbar Anthony, to me, represented the quintessential Hindi film of a particular time period, and we are talking about the 70s, but you can consider it the 60s or later. And because it was about an India that was the India that we know of and remember in the shall we say 92 era. 92 would mean two things: liberalization as well as the riots in Bombay and the riots elsewhere, in which many things changed. So I like to think of that being a kind of a period, a line before and after. Secondly, it's a film about Bombay, not merely a film shot in Bombay, it's a film about Bombay, without being a film about Bombay. The cosmopolitanism, you see communities mixing with each other. And thirdly, it's a damn good entertainer. You can watch it on television today, 35 years later, and you still sit down on your couch and you look at it and you say, hey, that's a great scene. So, very important for a film, an iconic film, maybe not a great piece of cinema, but an iconic film which has traveled well over 35 years. And that drew me towards this film. And it's become a metaphor for some very good things and some very, shall we say, funny things. So you say the Manmohan Desai type of cinema.
Entertainment.
Lost and found, totally illogic, all kinds of miracles going on, but entertaining. And a particular kind of, it's a metaphor also. When you say Amar Akbar Anthony, you mean something about the country and our society of people living with each other, the diversity, the pluralism, etc. Very important things in today's context.
So what's changed from that? I mean, not just the cinema, but the world as we live in now, and then
the way to address that would be to say, can this film be made today? Shall we just throw up this question in the air? I think not. Because our anxieties about communities is different, our relationships are different. You have a character called Akbar, who is of a Hindu background, but brought up by a Muslim kindly Muslim gent, the kind of stereotypical kindly Muslim gent of the time. But he is also a very peace-loving, music-loving man. He wears his skull cap, he wears his shirt, he wears a transparent shirt, so we look at him and, we take him at face value. We perhaps think that there is a little bit of stereotyping going on, but we laugh. The same with the Christians. Today, you try to make a film like this, you'll be stuck with about 2,000 PILs. Somebody or the other will be offended. Somebody from that community will be offended. Somebody from not that community will be offended, and that's equally sinister, in my opinion. Our anxieties about communities are different. The skull cap means much more now than it ever did. And of course, the practical things of problems of making that film, because where do you get 6 top stars? in one place, all of them ready to give each other that much space. We remember Amar Akbar Anthony as a Bachchan film, no question about it. But Rishi Kapoor got 5 songs. And today, we don't know whether that will happen. The 3 top male stars, the 3 top female stars. So those practical things, as well as our understanding of what that story is, would make it difficult. I also like to say that today people might say, what's the big deal? Go on Facebook and find your brother, yeah? Stop whining about it.
Right. So, you know, you're also interested in that period, which is going to be the subject of your next book as well.
I'm very interested in that period. To me, two periods of Bombay are of great interest. One is the 50s and 60s. The 50s because, you know, there is a sort of kind of understanding that perhaps the golden period post-independence of what Bombay was. It's all in the memory, of course. And the 70s, particularly because that's when I was growing up, that's when I saw, and the 70s saw a lot of things. The 70s saw the emergency, the politics change, there was violent agitations, there were student riots, but 71 was when we won 2 series abroad. A lot of these small cultural signals, I call them, and I'm very interested. So my next book is about India in the 60s and 70s, the first post-Raj generation, the Midnight's children growing up. The device is the rock bands of the era.
I see.
So I have gone and talked to and met and interviewed about 100 musicians who were in the rock bands, and I'm using that to understand what India was all about in the 60s and 70s, when the Raj hangover was more or less over, and this generation was demanding a certain kind of voice. It was the end of jazz, musically speaking, and the beginning of rock. But the rock was raucous, it was noisy, it was rebellious, and that was being reflected because the Naxalites came up and the student riots happened. So it's that kind of thing going back and forth. And that's my next book. Hopefully will be out in a couple of months in January.
So Sidharth, what does this mean to you? I mean, how are you seeing this whole study as almost as a historian rather than a film historian?
Well, amateur historian really, but I see it. That's a question that that question matters to me because I am seeing it in a particular way. I'm seeing it in 2 ways. I'm seeing it as purely an understanding of cultural history. Indians are very poor at their history. We think the freedom movement and medieval times are the only history or ancient Indian history. For example, if you wanted to read a book on the emergency, what would you do? You can't. You just have to go to Google or archives or a library or Wikipedia or something like that. So it's important to reflect a cultural history of our times. And I'm hoping that 20, 30, 40 years later, this will have some value. But the other thing is that all my work looks at the cosmopolitan idea of Bombay and India. It is not flagged. I don't shout about it. I don't even mention it in most places, but it reflects the idea that India continues to be a cosmopolitan place, or at least a pluralist place, and Bombay, for all its problems, Mumbai too, quite honestly, continues to have that cosmopolitanism. Who is sitting next to you in a train, or rather standing next to you in a train? Who are you working with? All those things do melt away, and we are facing some problems. The fabric is a little frayed, but I have taken it upon myself to explore the cosmopolitan idea.
Right, and as you look back and then if you were to look forward, so do you look forward in or ahead in optimism? And I'm really asking about your own personal feelings in this.
My personal feelings, I'm very sure that the cosmopolitanism cannot go away, because if it goes, it will not just tear the fabric.
Critical kind of component of the whole fabric, and that's really what you're saying.
Because without that, how do we
nothing
exist?
Else.
I mean, you can have signs saying this community not allowed and that community not allowed. But without that, where are we? Can you have a city just run by only one community or one kind of people? You can have a building of vegetarians, but can you have a city? Can you have a country? You can't. It will tear the country asunder. I think that deep down, even if we may not always subscribe to it, we do have to instinctively understand it, because without that, and I'll give you a very practical example. In the 92-93 riots, and I'm sure you remember them, they say about 200,000 people left the city. Many of them were from lower middle class or lower strata or something. Many of them were karigars,
Yes.
if you remember,
Yes.
who were doing embroidery work and things like that. And I dare say that must have played a role in the fashion industry moving out of Bombay. The fact of the matter is, we do have fashion designers, but Delhi emerged as a fashion center. Now, cause and effect, we don't know. But you cannot do without people from every conceivable background. And where do you stop? You stop at this, or you stop at that. Where do you stop? So cosmopolitanism, you can call it anything. You can call it, economic necessity, but it's going to never go away, because without that we cannot. How it was at that time is my way of addressing it. I hope that it's not.
And also telling people that, this is really what the bedrock is of.
Bedrock was and bedrock is
yeah.
and will be.
Yeah.
I've hoped, and I hope it comes through. I have not tried to be maudlin and nostalgic. I think the reporter's hat is always firmly on my head, but I think the message comes through in all my works.
Right.
In fact, my first book on Navketan was called Cinema Modern. So the idea is to explore the modern India.
Right. And that's a fascinating insight, Sidharth, and look forward to your next book and to keeping the glory alive.
Well, thank you very much, Govind. But I hope people don't get turned off to say you're talking about rock bands or you're talking about this grand philosophical idea.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great device, as you said. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.